All right. Welcome, everybody, to the Open Source Committee meeting here for July 19th. Give it just another minute or so, see if we're getting anybody else popping in, but I will share the agenda. Don't know that we'll have any updates from incubation, but if we get Alex in here, maybe he can provide something. I don't remember if they met this week or not. I'll talk a little bit about oracles. The first thing we're going to focus on is policy. When Adam gets here, we'll talk about the voting. DevX, I'll give an update kind of related to developer advocates. We're in the middle of interviews. Hey, Adam. I don't know if there's anything from the office, but if you have questions, we can ask it there. A little bit of open forum, continued discussion from last week as far as the open source library project list. I know there's a few people that are interested in that, and we want to get that put together. It just may take longer. Okay, Solana can do incubation. Great, thank you. Christian won't be here with us today, so it'll just be me, but if you have questions, let me know. And then I'll circle back on the poll that we did a few weeks ago. I think there was a question, I don't remember if it was internal to the committee or external to the committee, of if that was relevant or not. That's really what we'll talk about then. But yeah, I guess we'll get started with who we've got. And Adam, if you're ready, not throw you on the spot, then we'll ask you about the policy working group and where you're at with the voting policy. And we're going to devote, if we can, 15, 20 minutes, whatever's necessary there. See if we can't get that approved so we can get some candidates going and fill those seats by the next meeting or the meeting after. So.
Yeah, absolutely. So we did have the working draft proposal for how, and can you guys hear me okay? Just checking, I just got everything set up. So we just got we had this working draft for how committee elections should work that I wrote a few months ago. We got a little bit of feedback from MPJ when he was with us. And then since then, it's kind of quieted down. All that to say, we are running up against a time deadline now. So I think at the very minimum, what we need to do is do a public all call for who is interested. Open the self-nomination process at the very least, and put ourselves onto a ticking clock. And then Christian and I had discussed potentially just doing a voting process that was as simple as a Google form linked to the email that is attached to your Intersect membership or something, since it's unlikely that we're going to have an actual deeply integrated proof of member for this go round. But at the very least, we can make it only available to people from their membership portal, and then it has to be tied back to the email that you used attached to your membership to prove that only voting members are actually participating. So I would be in favor of at least giving us 2 weeks from the whatever day we announce that nominations are open, which would probably be Monday. Because we've all seen what launching on Friday does as of this morning. So if we plan on opening nominations on Monday, run that for at least 2 weeks, and then figure out our voting method and how long the voting will remain open in the course of that next 2 weeks, I think we can actually execute at least the first election, public committee election on behalf of Intersect. But yeah, open to thoughts from the rest of the committee.
Did you have a document that we should review that details this at all, or?
Yeah, let me find it. It's in our open source committee Git book, so I'll pull it up real quick.
Oh, okay.
All right, yeah. So that was the draft, and I do believe we have a pull request already against this branch, but this is the kind of the rendered version.
And then I don't know if it was made public yet, but as opposed to voting for the 3 empty seats, we'd be voting for 4 empty seats, as we've received notification that Marchand is stepping down from the OSC. Just for anybody who was not aware, that's an update as well.
I guess one thing that should be called out more here is who the electors are. It seems like in quorum, this is suggesting that it's, you know, the committee selects its replacement, but we should probably call that out more explicitly because that's something that might want to change in future.
Yeah, and that was definitely something that needed to change. It was unclear when I had originally started drafting it. I was under the impression that, you know, like the open source committee at the very least would kind of be self-appointing from the community rather than potentially random people that have never contributed to open source in any way, shape, or form raising their hand. But it seems like we're going to open all the committees up to the general public of the Intersect membership and see what public elections get us. So I don't know if there are qualifications for this committee or not in terms of who's allowed to apply. That would be something to consider.
Well,
but yeah, the voters would be, I think the voting, the goal is the voting quorum would be the public members of Intersect. So that there's a difference between who's eligible for nomination and who's voting. And yeah, so I think we need to fix that. I agree, Nicholas.
Okay, yeah, because currently right now it's suggesting
that, that we would all be voting on who's allowed to come in or whatever, whereas yeah, it's going to be the public membership voting.
Okay, yeah. I mean, what one might want to consider, you know, well, so one of the things that I was suggesting for the TSC, which we may also want for the OSC, is that, you know, so the TSC, obviously there will be something. How do you enforce that? Well, one of the ways to do that could be, for example, for the technical seats, we elect the technical seats in the OSC from the electors are all currently recognized maintainers of Intersect projects. I can see that potentially being a similar thing for the OSC might be, you know, given that we are largely concerned with, you know, open source, but then having some of those members elected by maintainers might be but that's also something we can iterate on. So
I don't know if this was said as of yet, but this would be the process that we would utilize between now and October, because internally there's another process being built out for voting on chain that's designed for all committees. So that essentially is going to override what's going on. I'm trying to have as much say in that as I can, but that's not what's happening currently. So basically, I'm keeping an eye on it, so I'm in the know. But
yeah, because they are doing a very different process than this. So yeah.
or was that back to me or just an add-on?
That was just an add-on. It was just an add-on, Terrence. It was basically sitting there going, because I'm looking at this and I just saw the other presentation and I'm just like, these are very different.
Yes, it is very much different, and I'll just leave it at that for now.
Yeah. So, yeah, I get it as to why they're trying to standardize, because some of this stuff needs to be in the bylaws. But it is one of those things that, engagement is important too. So,
I guess one of the other things not covered by this is roles within the committee. I assume we're mostly working on a basis of electing for seats and then some internal process for.
So I have some different thoughts on that, and that's where I'm really trying to strengthen this different policy that we're seeing. And that I'm waiting on confirmation to share it. I guess I should probably just be able to share it at this point. Let me just show it now here. Give me just a second. I gotta find it. I had it open. Guess I closed it. Okay.
Yeah, and real quick, while Tex is getting that, Solana, we do have that repo that is linked. It does actually contain, I believe, the baseline charter, but we didn't have anything about how this committee governed itself or what the roles were.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, normally that would go into the charter, because what you would do is you'd have your purpose and all that kind of stuff. And then one of the things you would have is your roles, who's in those roles, and then what the processes are for it. And then you just keep updating it with like when the roles change. Just like, and often, a lot of this often parallels what the board has to do. Like for example, the board, when you're a nonprofit, even a Wyoming nonprofit, you still have to file who your board members are, what their affiliations are, what your bylaws are. And typically what happens in those bylaws is it does dictate who the major committees are. It doesn't have to have the committee's charters though. That can be abstracted out. And so it allows for that type of diversity if you're doing that. But if they are setting kind of like a larger standard, then that normally does move over into there. And so that might be a point of contention between the OSC, the TSC, and the board part. And so that would be something to, think about on that. Is like, what is that doing? But at the same time, if they're looking at doing things that are like membership-wide elections, then they've also got a good reason. So in regards to helping with voter fatigue and voter confusion, if you do have elections for all of the different things all across the board, at certain timed intervals, then they can get a lot more marketing power out and behind it for y'all being able to do the different things that you want to do. So that might be something to consider as well, is that there's pluses and minuses in both directions.
So what I have here, just for everyone's reference, because I know you're staring at it, is a adaptation, or rather, it's just a direct copy right now from what the TSC created as they're trying to get up and running. So mind you, a lot of this is not quite yet fully edited yet, but basically they define seats and elections. But this part here is what I was looking to emulate for the different chair roles that we would have. It's not that we have to, or not chair roles, I'm sorry, seats. One, of course, would be the chair. Again, technical or non-technical can change. I don't think we'd have that terminology because we're not TSC. But a description, responsibilities, desired skills, or even desired experience, something that we can put in here. And we can do this for each seat, and then also one that would be for a general seat as well. But this was my idea. That way, when we get, let's say, applications or a campaign for somebody who wants to be on the OSC, obviously the community will have an opportunity to decide, but we'll give them something to grade against, would be the idea here. So again, I wasn't part of the meetings where the TSC put this together. I did see it after they'd created it, and I thought that was pretty cool. I said, hey, this is something that we should use and then assimilate across all of the committees. I have not been able to get that agreement across the board. There's a little bit of internal, I don't know. When we all get together as far as committee secretaries, it's not that everybody's there at every meeting. So there's a little bit of a bigger work effort that way. I've had to refocus my priorities right now. So as this moves along, like I said, I'm keeping tabs on everything so that when a bigger change is required, that hopefully we can push something like that through. But what I can control is OSC, right? Or what I can present to you all is stuff that we can do to strengthen what we have, and that's what I'm trying to show you here.
Yeah, I'm a bit worried about doing these seats the way that they're being done. For example, with the executive steering committee that they're talking about creating, for that, it was advised that you have, reserved seats, and those reserved seats are for each lead of each committee, right? So the chair of each committee goes and sits in there and does that, and then they have like 2 random elected ones for transparency and visibility, right?
Mm-hmm.
For things like the OSC and the TSC, having seats like this, it seems like those would all be working groups that would be reporting into this group. Like if you sit there and you have something for core and you have something for those things, because this seems like a little bit too centralized in regards to that. By having the seats being that way, are you suggesting to do that for the OSC as well, or I'm confused by that?
So for the TSC, that's definitely, the TSC is a decision-making body that's going to be, so there are absolutely technical requirements on being a TSC member. It's no use having a TSC that doesn't have the technical chops to be able to, or the research chops to be able to, at least govern. Yes, they can reach out to other people, but ultimately they're going to need to be making those decisions. So for the TSC, it makes total sense. I guess for the OSC, it feels, my only feeling is for the OSC, again, it's we don't want a vacuous OSC that really ends up being elected with a bunch of people who have not actually done any development on Cardano related products. If you have that, you basically end up with a committee that's totally divorced from its actual purpose. So there may be some sense in having some OSC seats reserved or elected by people who have actually contributed to products, and so have a vested interest in the outcome of what's going on. You probably don't want all of them done that way, because you don't want to the self-perpetuating oligarchy, but having some of it makes a lot of sense. I'm not sure whether we want to distinguish all of the roles in the OSC in the same way, like the TSC. It makes sense to have, like, yes, some roles should represent the state pool community, because again, they have a specific interest in, and the TSC needs to evaluate what is the impact on this proposed thing on all of these relevant people. The OSC probably not so much, but the actual maintainer contributor community is probably one that we should have some representation from.
Yeah, I've just never seen it where you go and you reserve seats like this in a technical steering committee. I've never seen that before. I've seen it where you have a lot of important groups that feed in and do that, and you have technical requirements on the nominations process. But I've never seen it where you're reserving seats like this, and I would be very careful about doing that, because it has other repercussions. One of the ones that maybe you don't see at first is that everybody will be like, why don't I have one? So once you start going and reserving those like that, you're going to have a lot of other groups going, why don't I have a seat? Why doesn't, are you saying that this group that we're in is not as important as the other ones are? So I would be very careful doing that. I would also be careful doing that for liability reasons, but you're going to get some identity politics happening on you pretty fast.
So I guess my idea in bringing this here, right? Obviously, this is some really great feedback, and that was that's going to be initially helpful, right? My thought process was bring this here, show this to everybody, and if there was agreement in any format, right, even if there's edits, then to pass this off to Adam and the policy working group to look at what this actually shows by October. What I'm thinking is bridging the gap between the two opinions here, right, because I think they're both founded and reasonable. My goal was not to sit here reserving a specified seat with a specified role per se, as much as the chair. This is what I've been trying to arbitrate. Like the chair, it was said was going to be elected within the committees. I've gotten pushback from a number of different resources that way that I may not have any say in come the end of it. I'm not saying that I should have the say on it, but I think it would be appropriate for the membership to elect who's going to be the chair of each committee, because by that point they are what I realized again today, and why it was a problem for me initially. By electing the chair for the committee, they are also electing the executive steering committee, as was mentioned. So I'm going to take that back internally as well and say, hey, no, what I was saying before is true because of that reason. You're shaking your head there, so I'm watching.
Yeah, no. I'm with you.
Okay.
I've never heard, again, me sitting there saying like, okay, I've been in probably 20 different open source nonprofits at this point. Okay, like participated in. I've actually formed 5, and I've never seen it where the populace elects the head of the committee. Like that's just I've never seen that either. So and like you said, that's seems weird. I know that they are trying to do it through ranked choice voting, and so there might be some stuff that makes that less difficult or problematic because of that. But I still think that it takes away a certain autonomy from that organization, from that committee if you do that. And I find that to be problematic for that reason. But I've never heard of that before. So yeah.
Okay. Well, I'll sum up what I was
Maybe
saying.
this is a good opportunity for us to get out in front of some of these bad policies that people are proposing and just do a correct election and or appointment of seats, so that this proscriptive bureaucracy that we seem to be getting a lot of from all the meetings I've been in lately gets kind of squashed down in favor of established good best practices that nonprofits and HOAs and everybody else has been using for decades with great success.
Yeah, I just worry because like when you do things that, when you do things that are different, you have to really be careful about the optics. Because that's when people go around and they get upset and they scream collusion and, biases and things of that nature. And that's one reason why people do kind of stick to those things, even though sometimes they're a PTA. But if you do that, you always need to have a really good reason. Like I totally agree with the idea of a civics committee. Because of the fact that you're doing something that's brand new that needs to go all the way up to the top and, yada, yada. I don't understand the perimeters committee though, because I'm like, why does that not go under the civics? Why is there not some kind of thing that happens in regards to that there? Because I'm not used to certain ones. But I do feel like when you're doing something that's totally new, yes, have that new thing create itself correctly. But some of the other things I don't understand as to why it's happening. Like I would never have a committee that's called the roadmap committee. Roadmap is a thing. It's a working group. It's something that answers to another group. It doesn't, do you know what I mean? Like, and so I see these oddities and I worry about them because of the fact that the optics makes it look weird. And what happens is like anyone who's participated in any of this stuff before comes in and goes, what the hell is this? Why is this here? And way too often people go the wrong direction with it. Rather than understanding, oh, it's just there because we needed to get it organized and we started working on it and we didn't know where to put it. So we made it this. But that's but we're cleaning up now. Right. So since we're cleaning out, let's get in and talk about these things if we can.
So I want to open it up to the rest of everyone else. I know there's been some agreement by reactions and things like that, but if anybody else wanted to say or ask something specifically, I'll give you that floor. Before I do that, I will answer Tivo's question here in the chat just real quick. Does OSC answer to someone? The direct answer to that would be no, other than the board or the exec committee, because of the structure that Intersect has established. But realistically, the OSC would answer to the community in determining to be open source. So those are the two different purviews. But like I said, if anyone else, before we close out this topic, wanted to add something, I don't want to not give you that opportunity.
I hear all the options being put forward, and they all sound like super heavy bureaucracy, and nothing about it sounds or feels open. Maybe we can find a principle to center on that can help us ensure openness in opposition to the natural tendency for people to be leaning toward bureaucracy.
What do you mean by not open? I guess I don't understand that.
You do all these elections and suddenly only the committee can have any say, and that's not open.
I mean, the committee doesn't, I mean, the OSC is an advisory board anyway. It has no strict decision-making power. So, but I don't see why you elect a committee means that only, I mean, that's how representative democracy works, right?
Doesn't feel open. Feels closed.
So is it something like you? Okay, so
Sorry, Tio. Quick question. Are you assuming that this means that there wouldn't be open meetings and open notes and all of these other things being published where people can't have a say in regards to it? Because often in most meetings, they always have committees like this. It's just that it's open, right? And what that means is like, it's not closed doors. It's like, if you want to attend, if you have something to say, if you want to do that, it's fine. It's just, you're not a voting member, right? Just like, you know, that's how that's like often technical steering committees in open source operate that way. It's like anyone can come and look and say some stuff, but in the end, they don't vote. In the end, the voting members vote, but people can come in and like present things or bring in ideas or do different things. Is that what you're saying, Randall? Is it you don't believe that that's still going to be there, or for the OSC, or are you, or is there something else that you're meaning? I'm sorry, I'm trying to figure it out.
All the words say open, but this committee doesn't have a voice. The places where we can openly go and talk and have our words heard don't have any influence. And coming and saying the words and then having other people actually doing the choosing, it's like a presentation of openness that's not actually openness. I suppose if the words carry enough weight, then people who do have the voice being able to vote can be swayed. Did I get it right?
It's not clear what concretely you're talking about. I mean,
but
we
I'm
have.
also wondering,
Sorry.
like on the flip side, if we don't do elections and we don't get representatives to which we trust to do decisions based on the open access information, then it will be more chaotic to, yes, perhaps there would be more stuff coming up because it would be like huge list of tables. Everything is on the same level. And probably the only way to come to focus is to have sentiment analysis, but then we need to start thinking of deeds and maybe one voice reputation that has a different level of complexity, which you don't want to start with, because yes, it's sometimes bad to centralize, but having representatives will provide opportunity for community to select those people who are willing to decentralize the open access. And if the people who are being in representative, yeah, I know maybe we need to be some reviews or some way to kind of see how well they are accumulating the wealth of information that is provided and like rationale to all the decisions, instead of like, oh yeah, you said this, but I don't have time for this decision. We are on this topic. So yeah, anyway. So to me, it's much harder to have an open room if there is nobody who is leading the decision and everybody is part of the leading.
Yes.
Thanks for that, Teva. I appreciate it.
That just makes me think too, Tivo, of fences make for good neighbors. I don't know if y'all have heard that idiom or not, but
I mean, ultimately, stuff needs to get done, right? You know, you have committees because ultimately smaller groups of people can get things done in finite amounts of time, where large groups of people cannot. You know, where there's no direction. It's not a case of who has the voices about getting things, actually achieving things.
By spending half of the meeting slot on not achieving things. Sorry, I'm just the voice of the opposition, or the voice of their perspective.
All right, so I'm gonna. Oh, sorry, Adam.
No, go ahead.
I was gonna say I'm gonna be that strong force in here. I got to cut off the conversation on this topic for now because we got a few other things to get to. I want to take the whole hour going back and forth. So I'll forward this along here to Salona. She said she's got something she can tell us on incubation, project incubation working group.
so the funny thing about the project incubation working group is mea culpa on me, because I still have some stuff that I have to deliver to the core infrastructure group. So I wasn't able to sit down this week and do the metrics with him yet. But he's actually got a pretty good outline already going, because he went and grabbed a bunch of the possible things off of Chaos. So we've actually got, a listing of some of the things we want to go in there and measure, but we still don't have all of it. And to be quite honest, the group that's got the other stuff done isn't as good on what I would like to see in regards to the technical measurements too. I think we've got a lot of stuff in regards to community viability and all that stuff's really good right now, but not necessarily on some of the other pieces. And so I hope to be adding some more of that with him next week, because I have to turn in one of the major things on Monday and the other major thing on Tuesday. So I'll be able to work with him to take that further at that point. That's when I start putting that in there, that's when everything's going to get controversial, because that's when it always gets controversial, is that when we're talking about the general things, then it's like people are like, yeah, of course we need this. Of course, yes, quality. We all need quality. But when I sit there and say quality means X, that's when it'll get controversial. So I'll bring that back in. Everybody know that my ego is not going to be damaged by any feedback that happens in regards to that. So because I know that that's the controversial part and that we have to come to a thing on it. But I am going to lay some stuff down just so that y'all have stuff to get your red pen out on and go mark on. All right. So that's what I'm going to be doing with him next week, is basically creating that, and just be nice to Alex. Okay. Solana can take it on the chin, but yeah. So thanks.
All right, and with that, we can go on to. I'll just share the agenda again so everyone can see it. Next up is Oracles. The Oracles working group, still a little bit under construction. I was part of that meeting. Solona was there as well. So we've refined what their initial tasking is just to get fully established. And we'll see if we need to do any additional ad hoc meetings or anything that way. Hopefully, I would say probably within a month's time, we'll give them an opportunity to meet another 1 or 2 times here. We'll see if we can get down to what exactly they're going to be doing and how that's going to benefit the ecosystem overall. So go ahead.
I think one flag to raise on that we might want to consider, text, and this is like outside of the thing, is there any Oracle standards happening anywhere? Because this is feeling like a a lot of the discussions that we've been having with them has felt like a standardization portion. And I was just wondering, because Oracles aren't unique to us. So do you know if there's any other, or does anybody on this call know if there's any other Oracle standardization groups that are going on? Because that's what this feels like and what it feels like it needs to be. And I'm totally cool with helping to try facilitating something along those lines. But what's going down with that? Well, it's kind of funny, Tiva, because you say Chainlink, but Chainlink's one of them, right? And so a good standard, has diverse use cases and diverse companies bringing in the input, typically, unless they have like extreme market dominance, like, well, Apple. Right, like Apple goes standard. Thankfully, the EU went no, but that's just one of the things that happens. So yeah, you go. Chainlink, don't know how diverse it is.
My guess is also, I mean, how an Oracle works on Ethereum is likely to be, or another chain is likely very different to how an Oracle will have to work in Plutus, just because of the deterministic Plutus evaluation model. So I don't know because I haven't looked, but my guess is we might find that most existing Oracle specs are just unworkable in the Plutus model.
Yeah, I know next to nothing about Oracle, so like I'm totally flying blind here. This is like not my bucket of things I've worked on. So I'm like, I don't know. Is there, so I'm asking for generalities because I'm just trying to figure out how to help them in regards to that. And so that's why I'm asking that, is I'm like, and if that's true, does that mean that those standards will have to be specific to each on those?
Well, one, if you actually look at the Chainlink, they are doing cross-chain oracles a lot because their whole principle is connecting as many oracles from other chains as possible. So that they're reaching hundreds of thousands now. So some way this is standardized, but then again, it's all from how do you integrate it with Chainlink and that other chain. But I'm not sure how well it's defined how the other chains are working, or they're just taking the APIs and getting the like basic things like how do you verify, how do you submit, how do you and that's it.
Gotcha. So just to like translate for the old tech lady, it sounds like they're doing something kind of like Apogee did with APIs, where they were like a third-party API handler. Is that what that is? I'm sorry, I'm getting off topic. You're right, Terrence. But okay. I'll go do some research. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, just my last thought on what was said there. I mean, maybe it's a matter of where we need to open that group up to, because I know right now it's founded by different people who are working on oracles in the Cardano ecosystem. But maybe we need to open that up more to the developer side or other input as far as, and like maybe change that title to just be open specifications. Is that more general, or?
I don't know. I don't know on that one at all. I know that they have a very specific problem that they are trying to solve in regards to that. And I get that. So I can't speak to that at all. All I know is that I'm just trying to figure out what level these things could possibly occur at. Because like I said, it's just, having done all these standards, it's sounding very standardized, and so it's just like, well, it's a little awkward to be making a work group a standard group, because standards require a lot more rules normally. Like with standards, you sit there and you have like, Robert's Rules of Order, and you do a bunch of different things along those lines. Sorry, Randall, it's like your nightmare. Okay, dude. But
yeah, I was off mic saying, oh, geez. Let's
Well,
let them do Oracle things, guys. Let's let them don't just
it's
wiggle their elbow.
oh my God,
Other
dude.
topics
It's
do we
like
have?
doing standards after doing open source. I just sometimes want to shoot myself. I'm not, it's bad. Because it's soul crushing because you have like so much process and so much stuff. In fact, I have a book called The CIA's Guide to Community Sabotage. And I was like joking that I was going to put on it the IEEE standards rule book. Because it's just like so many anti-patterns that prevent, from creating a community, but it is about keeping, you can have some really extremely bad actors happening when you do standards because I had to deal with, patent trolls all the time, and different people who are like purposely trying to sabotage because it's money, right? And people come in and they're skillfully sabotaging, and it's like half lawyers and et cetera, ad nauseum. So, you have to be careful and you have to have those constructs in place to keep people from behaving negatively. But it's weird to do it on a work group level because it can accidentally take away power from a, they can easily overstep their pay grade, I guess is a way of putting it. So yeah. Yes, Adam. Yeah, that's what they were discussing on it. So
All right.
so thank you. Adam, I might have to pick your brain at some point.
Yeah, this is very similar to what we've been doing in the SIP editors channel to try to standardize around a new and more robust wallet connection standard. Because what we had was one person's best practice that became the way we've always done it, and not necessarily the best way to do it. So we're kind of going through some of those similar growing pains in the wallets working group. So
Totally. Yeah, let's take this somewhere else because I feel like that's a whole, that's like advanced level. Like when I brought that over at first to Hyperledger, everybody freaked out because I did the same thing to them with DIDs. And so we probably do need to like take this a little bit offline and talk about some of those other processes because oh my God, it's going to be hard. And it's, like I said, it's not an easy process to go through, but it's a necessary one. So.
Okay. So I'll combine these next two items here, DevX and Intersect Open Source Office. I'm going to be jumping in more on the DevX side of things. Basically, the Developer Advocate Program has been handed over to myself, as Christian's got a lot of other things pulling him. So I'll be a little bit more participative in that group. As far as the open source office related to DevX, we are conducting interviews for developer advocates right now. Pending contract finalization on the back end, we'll be able to announce the selections and begin moving forward. We're hoping we can get that going as soon as August, so we've got as many full months as possible between now and the end of the year to get a full program evaluation. Let me go back to the beginning here for just a brief moment, only to make sure, do we get agreement on what we have now, or is that something that we need to reconstruct and come back in 2 weeks before we have everything ready to go? Like, were we ready to go for Monday as far as like a nomination period starting, or it was? I thought there was a lot of discussion that said maybe we redo, but.
yeah, I guess the question would be, do we need to spend some amount of time, even if it's a week, with an open call for what should the nominee criteria be, and then develop an announcement to open that candidacy period. Because yeah, I do think there should be some minimum required nomination that where you at least say like, hey, here's what I've done in terms of open source. I don't think we need to be as restrictive as it looks like TSC is trying to be, where it's like you must have done 5 pull requests against Cardano node repo, otherwise you're not allowed in. We can be a little bit more open than that, I think, because we want outside people who maybe aren't core developers to get involved in this process. And so, but yeah, I think we need to define that a little bit better. So maybe we give it another week now that we've shared this again, and I'll recirculate into the Discord open communication channels as well, saying that we're looking for final thoughts on nominee criteria, and then go from there.
I mean, the problem I see with nominee criteria that aren't very simple is that then somebody has to evaluate them, and then whoever gets the power to evaluate them becomes, you know, a de facto veto on. So yeah, that was why I pushed instead for, like, you know, having specific electors from where you can have very easy criteria that can be, you know, objectively validated, but leaving open on the basis that those communities themselves probably have an idea of what the members need to have.
So
Yeah,
following that suggestion, do we do a special session on maybe Wednesday or Thursday next week so that we could launch for the Monday? And the reason I'd say it's okay to launch for Monday is because we meet on the 2nd of August and on the 9th of August. So we still be meeting on the closeout day of that 2-week nomination period. If we do a special session next week, I mean, to finalize everything.
Yeah, probably the other important thing to consider is that we're also walking into this assuming that we're going to have like an overwhelming number of people that are willing to raise their hand, and look at how hard it's been to, you know, when we've been going by buddy recommendation appointment for the last year, we've got 4 open seats. So, you know, that probably says a lot about the level of interest in even being a part of this committee. So it's probably not going to be an overwhelming number of nominees that we have to worry about, I would imagine.
yes.
Yeah, I would also agree with that.
So special session or async until the 2nd? Just confirming that.
I think we go async, in my opinion. Trying to get everybody together at a time that's going to be working and conducive is probably going to, again, be another matter of kicking the can out further. So yeah, let's just put it into the public channels and discuss it asynchronously there. And then once we get an overwhelming show of thumbs up or something, we'll ship it.
Okay, that'll work. Don't want to steal highlights from open forum, so anything that anybody wants to bring up to the OSC. Okay. We talked briefly about this, or maybe a little bit more than briefly last time, the open source library and the project list. Is there any interest in still making that a working group? And I'm not pushing for it to be there right now. I'm perfectly okay that we work on developing that between now and the end of the year. I know there's some other pushes to get things out as quickly as possible, but I wouldn't want to rush and not have that be exactly what we want it to be. So is that still something that we should discuss asynchronously? Do we get a group going together? Do we call it a working group or a special interest group? What are the thoughts?
Do we have anyone who is motivated to lead that group would seem my immediate question. I mean, there's no point saying let's put a group together if nobody is wanting to do that.
I think the time commitment has been the issue there. So if anyone's got the time and they are motivated, it's a byproduct there.
Yeah, I would say I'm interested, but from the time commitment, I don't have enough time, at least until the hard work is done.
So what I could probably commit to is creating a draft for that. And I'll put some things out there in the OSC channel and Discord and stuff to get, like, I'll put a post and then just reply to that or respond to that for feedback on it, right? Things to include. And I'll share a document as well. Everyone can edit in. And I kind of just do a draft document, and then we'll kind of hobble this along through our committee meetings for the time being until somebody has some more time. Adam?
Yeah, out of curiosity, what are we planning on this like open source library thing? Like, what is it versus like Cardano Cube and these other things that we already have that have tried to map the ecosystem? So do we need to build yet another that has to be maintained in perpetuity is always the big question.
What's Cardano Cube?
Literally a list of like all the projects on Cardano, like all the wallets, all the dead things, all the NFTs. Like they've tried to actually record all of the things. So, like what would we be really accomplishing?
Maybe we can just use that.
Who's pushing that initiative, and why do they need it? What's the tension that is creating any momentum for it?
Want to get this hand deep here. He's got his hand raised for a minute.
Thank you. I think Cardano Cube is interesting. I can look it up a little bit. One point about this particular topic was about the dependency graph. What do we actually depend on? One line of thought from my side is having this visualization. What's the core library or package that the whole ecosystem is dependent on, but not visible enough? I vaguely remember something similar that Silvana talked about to one of the earlier meetings, kind of landscape of software that we have within the ecosystem. Yeah, software bill of materials. That fits good.
Missing things, some fairly obvious things like DB Sync, for example, just isn't in there. So I think things which are not like their own product, but which are fundamental tools, are lacking there.
Yeah.
I also think this list is not complete. So if we go over the list over Cardano Cube, there's a lot of tools not being mentioned there. And well, I have this experience with other teams who try to collect this information. I tried to reach out to get some of our tools there, but they didn't even respond or reply to it. So it's very biased what is mentioned in that list.
Hello?
Yeah. Thank y'all for giving me such great lead-ins. So I did a Catalyst proposal of basically doing a open source decentralized ecosystem mapping tool. And when I went through, that's where I did find these things, by the way. And what I wanted to do on my proposal, unfortunately, it got like approved, but it wasn't enough to get funding. It wasn't high enough prioritized to get funding. But the whole point was, and Adam Dean was on this, by the way, is the fact that we wanted to do something decentralized because of the problematic things that I see with a lot of the ecosystem mapping that's typically done. It's typically done with a bias. And so I was like, well, why don't we get something where we can gather all the data together? And yes, people can go and make biased visualizations of that data, but let's at least try to get the data together and do that in a, completely open, decentralized fashion so that everybody can do that. But one of the reasons I would really suggest that y'all should have one of these is, yes, of course, obviously, I believe that having something that as a resource, many products could exist on top of it, and it would be awesome for that reason. And honestly, I don't know how you're going to do marketing without doing that type of information. But there's also some very serious things that's happening in open source in regards to like the CRA in Europe, which is a civil Cyber Rights Act. They've been putting in a lot of different new laws in regards to security and things of that nature, where SBOMs are becoming requirements. And there are definitely some governments that are doing it, that they're basically saying we won't use your stuff unless you do it. But it's also starting to get legislated. So one major reason for doing some of this is to actually go in and do all that. And to be quite honest, you're never going to get to the levels that this community desires to do in regards to having all this open development and things of that nature if you don't have clear mappings of these dependencies in both directions. If we don't start figuring out what all of those are on the project levels, and this is just for the open source, not for the entire ecosystem, there may be legal liabilities that start to present themselves for that reason. So, and honestly, guys, it's just good software development. When I did the full stack for grid computing with 50 different open source materials in 2006, I created SBOMs. And I did that because of the fact that I had to worry about, the liability all the way up and down the stack. And so it's just good. It's just good programming. I mean, same thing at PayPal. PayPal doesn't adopt things without knowing exactly where all those dependencies come through. That's why they didn't get impacted by some of the other things that other companies got impacted by, because they weren't paying attention necessarily to some of those dependencies. So thanks.
TiVo, and then I'll close it out.
It's also unclear if this Cardano Cube open source, because I don't see like what Silona mentioned, like this open to share and put your own information there. There probably is some forms hidden, or like there is an add project button, but you cannot edit it. So having maybe internal Intersect one where only the Intersect members have access to list something. We can even start with like Google Sheet or like simple thing, Google Form, which already lists this information. But now the problem is who is going to curate it, and is there a person who is going to be reliable? Theoretically, it is like one person role and it is somewhat manageable. But then again, yeah, if that kind of resource allocation is possible, because I do there is a value, and if you go back in years, the Charles Hoskin also shared the same thing, that you want to have a list of all the projects that are interested, and then you also want to see which are audited, which are not. So you want to have more of columns. Here right now I see, okay, this is text, this is infrastructure, this is community, but maybe you want to see into teams, the dependencies of who are the people. Like if you look at the Lido Nation map from Project Catalyst, you can see proposal, who is listed, a person, click that person, these are all the tools they are working on. So if you look at Proofspace or somebody else, you can see they have so many products, and that will give you actually the real ecosystem map, not this disparate, all different things are unattached from each other. So I myself like this kind of knowledge management and this kind of collecting information. But yeah, I don't know if we need it right now and how much kind of is the budget for it.
Yeah, so there's a combination of factors that go into it. For one, like Silona was saying, we need a decentralized way to participate in these things so that there isn't gatekeeping necessarily. An individual implementation might restrict what's seen, but anybody can opt in, right? If we say you have to be an Intersect member, then we're just another opinionated list of software. But this is also kind of to what Alex has been crying for months of, we have tried to make these efforts to do these things, and then there's no funding. But then at the same time, like Randall was pointing out, if it becomes an Intersect job, then that's another paid position that we have to maintain in perpetuity for somebody to sit around and click approve on PRs or whatever else. So we're kind of damned if we do and damned if we don't from three different directions, no matter how we slice this. But my biggest thing lately has been trying to avoid reinventing the wheel, because I see that constantly happening with Project Catalyst and a lot of our efforts. So I said Cardano Cube not because it's a great necessary example, but we do have, Lido Nation and a couple of other names have also come up. So maybe this is an opportunity to incubate one of those projects, bring them in to the Intersect open source ecosystem, rather than build something brand new from scratch, just because we didn't build the first edition of it. Go ahead, Tex. I know we're getting at the end of time here.
Yeah, that's basically what I was saying. I would love to allow this conversation to continue. So I do want to encourage our Discord. It is an open channel, an open forum. So we can start a thread, or we can just have regular communication on this here. But please don't hesitate to continue that conversation there. And if and as necessary, we can, of course, pick this up as a topic in future meetings. The last thing before I officially stop it here, and I know we're right at time, there is a thought that we'd like to bring to the table. It's a suggestion to possibly move these meetings to Thursday mornings. That would be anywhere potentially from 7 to 11 a.m. Central Standard Time. That converts to 12 to 4 GMT. If there is some interest in that, what I can do is I can put a poll out on the Discord for the times of 7, 8, 9, or 10 a.m. Central. Okay. Looks like people are liking that, so I will put that poll out there for us to look at moving the meetings to Thursdays, and we will look at doing that, I would say, as soon as the meeting that's for the 9th, so that might move to the 8th. If we don't do it by that meeting, then we would do it for the meeting after. but I'll give it a good 2 weeks plus for us to get that poll out there. So please, if you're not on the Discord, go to the Discord. Let's communicate about some of the topics that we talked about today. Make sure you're responding to that poll, and we'll see everyone next time.